হয়েছে, শুরু করবে কি? সুভাশিস দা জয়েন এবারে শুরু করবেন?
Nalini, I will be getting in touch with you shortly.
সুভাশিস দা শুরু করবে?
There are certain things which I had thought of in the train, যা কথাবার্তা হয়েছিল, I will now kind of এইবার জিনিসটা করতে, কারণ তখন তো মিড সেমিস্টারের মাঝখানে সবকিছু ছিল আর সেটআপ পরের সেমিস্টারটাও সেটআপ হয়ে গেছিল, তো ঠিক আছে।
Looking forward to that.
হ্যাঁ, yes, একদম, কারণ জেনারেলি একটু আগে থেকে এখানে প্ল্যানিং হয়ে থাকে, তো সেই জন্য yes,
Yeah, I think there is some problem when I'm logging through my Lappy. My camera setting is somehow creating a problem. So, Swati, if it isn't a problem that when I am presenting, then I can do it through my Lappy, because maybe I can put off my camera if that is okay. There's some problem in my Lappy settings with the camera right now.
যদি সমস্যা হয় then you can turn off the camera. যদি না হয় you can just it works fine, না হলেও better.
শুরু করুন ম্যাডাম।
ক্যামেরা ইস্যু থ্রু মাই
ম্যাডাম শুরু করুন, লাইভে এসে গেছে।
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Shami Dhananjay Das Kathia Baba Mahavidyalaya, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this international webinar on Ecocritical Perspectives on Literature and Culture, organized by the Department of English. At a time when the climate crisis, environmental degradation, and concerns around sustainability dominate public discourse across the globe, literature and the humanities have emerged as powerful mediums through which we can re-examine our relationship with the natural world. This webinar is not merely an academic gathering. It is also an invitation to rethink our imaginative, ethical, and critical engagements with the environment. Eco-criticism as a mode of inquiry allows us to explore how literary and cultural texts reflect, reinforce, or resist prevailing ecological ideologies. It urges us to ask urgent questions. How does literature respond to the climate emergency? Can storytelling nurture ecological consciousness? What can we learn from indigenous, feminist, and post-colonial approaches to nature and place? By bringing together scholars and participants from diverse backgrounds, we hope to foster conversations that are both intellectually enriching and socially resonant. We are deeply grateful to our resource persons for joining us today and sharing their insights. I extend my sincere thanks to Sri Gorapada De, President GB, and to our Principal, Dr. Kapuli Ghosh Sengupta, for her continued support and encouragement. I also thank all the faculty members and students, especially from the Department of English, for their active participation and enthusiasm. Let this session mark a step towards nurturing a more compassionate and ecologically aware academic culture. Thank you, and I wish you all a meaningful and enriching session ahead. I now request our Principal, Madam Dr. Kapuli Ghosh Sengupta, to deliver her welcome address.
Thank you, Swati. A very good afternoon to everybody present today virtually. It is a privilege and pleasure to welcome you all to this international webinar on Ecocritical Perspectives on Literature and Culture, organized by the Department of English in collaboration with the IQAC of the college. In recent times, the relevance of environmentally conscious thinking has become increasingly central across disciplines. I am heartened to see our Department of English take this timely initiative to explore eco-critical approaches through the lens of literature and culture fields that shape and reflect our ways of seeing the world. On behalf of the college, I extremely warm welcome to our esteemed speakers, Dr. Saptoshi Mollik, Dr. Debarati Datto, and Dr. Mrinalini Ghosh, who are present today on this webinar. We are honored by your presence and grateful for the opportunity to engage with your scholarship. I also take this opportunity to welcome all participants joining us today, faculty members, researchers, and students from different institutions, and your presence enriches this academic gathering, and we are delighted to have you with us. I look forward to the discussions that will unfold today and trust that the ideas exchanged here will encourage further reflection and collaboration on these crucial themes. With that, I once again welcome you and wish the webinar every success. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am, for your thoughtful address. We now move on to the first session of the day. Our first speaker for the day is Dr. Saptoshi Mollik, and the title of his talk is Rabindranath Tagore and his Child Philosopher. Before inviting him to present, I'll take a moment to briefly introduce him. Dr. Saptoshi Mollik is an assistant professor at the Department of American Studies at the University of Graz, Austria. From September 2019 to March 2024, he served as an assistant professor of English at Shukanto Mohavidyalaya, Dhupguri, Jalpaiguri, under the University of North Bengal. He has been a Charles Wallace India Trust Doctoral Fellow and a UK India Education and Research Initiative Fellow. He was awarded the prestigious Ernst Mark Fellowship at the Karl Franzens Universität Graz, where he also served as a visiting faculty during the summer semester of 2020. More recently, he received the Sassoon Visiting Fellowship from Bodleian Libraries, University of Oxford. Dr. Mollik has edited several anthologies, including Sudraka's Mrityatika, a reader, and Finding Philosophers in Global Fiction, Redefining the Philosopher in Multicultural Context, published by Bloomsbury in 2024. He currently serves as an associate editor of Gitanjali and Beyond, an international open access journal affiliated to the Scottish Centre of Tagore Studies, Edinburgh. This monograph, Connecting Spaces, the Travelogues and Letters of Lady Obola Bose, has just been published by Routledge, UK and USA in June 2024. We are indeed honored to have him with us today. And with those words, I warmly welcome Dr. Mollik to deliver his presentation. Thank
you. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you, Dr. Sinha, for all the beautiful, kind words, though I was feeling a little bit embarrassed. But yeah, okay. Thank you so much. And I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Kakuli Khoshen Gupta, the Honorable Principal of Swami Dhananjay Das Kathia Baba Mohavidyalaya at Bhora, Bankura. And I'm also grateful to Dr. Shati Sinha for initiating this dialogue, which I suppose will facilitate creative and critical participation, not only in this medium today, but also in the days ahead. And I should not start without thanking my very dear friend, an elder sister, a colleague, and that is Dr. Debarati Datto of Dhupguri Girls College for connecting me with Dr. Sinha. So, and before I make my presentation, as Dr. Sinha has already mentioned, it's Rabindranath Tagore and his Child Philosopher. I also came to mention that my orientation and initiation into studying Tagore and his circle is primarily because of Professor Bashubi Fraser, who is the director of the Scottish Centre for Tagore Studies, where I am also, by God's grace, a research affiliate. So I will first share the PowerPoint. So I'm going to talk about Tagore and his child philosopher, and here I'm going to focus on Rabindranath's Bolai. We must remember that Tagore's religion was based on his realization of the infinite, which began its journey from the impersonal layers, the sky, where the light and had its manifestation. Then came to life, which represented the force of self-creation in time, and ended in Purusha, the person in whom dwells the timeless life. Now, this particular principle involves a pure enjoyment of knowledge as it nurtures the seeds of freedom through which our life facilitates a process of acculturation, which involves affiliating the distinct, even disjunct, with the other in the spirit of the right to difference and equality. It involves a change of our frame of mind, which permits us to abandon thoughts and ideas supporting monocultural points of view for an intellectual and creative openness that enables us to have an understanding of freedom through cultivating a mutual sympathy towards creating habits of coexistence by erasing shadow lines of conflict, emphasizing our obligation to one another in this globalized world with a real heterogeneity of interests and identities. Unfortunately, significant portions of the natural world have been destroyed for ages for ensuring the progress of human civilization. And through his writings, Tagore not only enabled his readers to effectively experience nature, but also warned them about the consequences of taking it for granted. He was not an anarchist, nor was he against civilization. However, he was time and again emphasizing the necessity to integrate the civilizational processes with nature so as to facilitate and appreciate the harmony of nature and human beings. Tagore's celebration of the interconnectedness of humans and the natural world has underlined the need to introspect on the rights of nature as well as on the role of sustainable development in our life processes, and has made us understand that the destruction of nature in the name of development, if not checked today, will inevitably lead to an environmental disaster. Since, uh, since 1980s, environmentalists across the globe have always emphasized the need for a more biocentric worldview, an extension of ethics, a broadening of humans' global conception of global fellowship community to include non-human life forms and the physical environment. But such a worldview offers only a valuable insight into the relationships of humans with non-humans being on the planet. Uh, Rabindranath was critical of the education system prevalent during his time. He emphasized the need for a policy which would facilitate human relationships with the other species and with the world around us through a close bond of nature, development of the land, and improvement in the lives of villagers. The harmony with nature, stressed by Tagore, vindicated the need to nurture sympathy in human beings for their fellow beings and for their environment, as he was concerned with the interrelations between education and the human approach to the natural environment. Tagore's thoughts on environmental issues often foreground the forests, which once covered India, and the forest hermitage which developed there. In his creative and critical writings, Tagore explores the kinship of humans with nature and refers to the Tapavana system of education in ancient India, the forest hermitage, and the Upanishadic mode of Guru Shishya education, which had captured his imagination since his adolescence. So he not only interrogated the false ontological dichotomy between humans and nature, but also established a unique philosophy and fleshed through his fictional works, where human beings and nature are figured on part of an ontological continuum. And Tagore is insisting the truth of our life depends upon our attitude of mind, which is formed by our habit of dealing with it. So, according to the surroundings and temperament. And such an understanding of the truth of our life has an eco philosophical dimension and involves discovering ecological knowledge, which is associated with relearning a language and rediscovering new ways of talking about the world. And Rabindranath, as we would see, explores such new ways of talking about the world through his fiction, probably more powerfully than through his essays. While in The Religion of the Forest and in the introduction to Lord Elmhurst's address entitled The Robbery of the Soil, Rabindranath formulates ideas that resonate with Spretnik's observations. His philosophy of the interrelatedness of humans and nature is probably best articulated through some of the characters in his fiction, where the characters emerge as the poet-philosopher incarnate, embody ideas as models for energy flow, community building, and ecosystems that are necessary for the harmonious living of human and non-human beings. Here, I'm going to focus on one of the two characters who are really very impressive and dear to me is Bolai, the little boy in Rabindranath's short story Bolai, and Shubhashini Shubho from the story. So the mute but not deaf girl from his short story Shubho. So these two characters, through their love for nature, embody the spirit of harmony that Tagore's eco-philosophy underscores, and in a unique way emerge as nature in human forms, pure and pristine, and hence radically different from the other human beings who are engaged in severing the bond between nature and humanity, and thereby ushering in spiritual barrenness. Through these children who emerge as unique philosophers of nature, embodying the very philosophy in their veins, Rabindranath highlights the important role nature plays in nurturing human beings and shaping the human consciousness. The narratives of these stories underscore the way an intuitive understanding of this close relationship between nature and human subjectivity facilitates an ideal empathetic bonding between human and non-human life forms, and present unique and profound non-anthropocentric figurations of the trajectories of human effect. Metaphysically speaking, this approach is grounded in the understanding that all move in that moving world are enveloped by God, and one should find enjoyment through renunciation and not through greed or possession. The lives of these children, presented by Tagore's fictional world, embody eco-philosophical principles and advocate the same to others. In this process, they emerge as philosophers, like Rabindranath himself, necessarily showing the path to others at the cost of being certainly misunderstood and ignored. So Rabindranath's philosophy of human beings' union with nature involves an ideal of perfect harmony and relationality. As he observes, one is related to the very truth of one's existence to all things that surround one. This approach, which he details in Atmaparichoy, involves a study of evolution and leads into Tagore's consideration of man as the greatest miracle of creation with his mind and potential, moving towards creative unity and freedom. And this great bliss or Sachidananda, the realization of the conscious being, is a realization of the freedom that lies in nature, which human beings need to explore in order to liberate themselves from the fetters of life through a consciousness and understanding of the spiritual kinship with nature. It augments a comprehensive understanding and revolves around learning from our past mistakes in order to develop an eco-critical cosmopolitan point of view through which a special kind of world citizenship is fostered, where the gulf between nature and human beings is bridged for realizing the dream of the champions of difference and diversity, and those who yearn for universal solidarity and justice and order. So the spirit of freedom, which embodies life amidst nature, overcomes cultural distance through a protracted act of understanding, through which human beings celebrate the freedom in adherence to the ethos of critical cosmopolitanism. This freedom, which is experienced by humankind while interiorizing nature within oneself, enables them to articulate an eco-philosophy which involves humanity's sacred association with nature in the hearts of men as sites of some great spiritual reconcilement. It is in this site of some great spiritual reconciliation that the human and the non-human identities get enmeshed within each other. For instance, as we would see that a tree becomes a living embodiment within Bolai, foregrounding the ontological entanglement of the little boy and the tree within a single existential circuit. So similarly, the child protagonist Amol in Rabindranath's Post Office to attains liberation within nature when he is in deep sleep. So Bolai, Amol, Shubho, that is Shubhoshini, they're all intimately attached with nature and experiences love in the midst of her intimate non-human friends from nature, while being despised by other humans, including her mother. So Bolai, Shubho, Amol, they all embodied Rabindranath's philosophy of life, where human and the non-human, and even the biotic and the abiotic, are involved in an integrated relationship of existential interconnectivity. So an extension of Tagore's insistence that environment was closely associated with the philosophy of ancient times in India. And Tagore had delved into the depths of his philosophy to discover humanity's association with the world beyond, the wondrous nature which governs all existence on this earth. So Rabindranath is vindicating the ontological continuum of human and non-human existences, foregrounding the futility of human beings' assumption of their superiority over eternal nature. And when he, in the second birth, an essay in his book Personality, refers to the Upanishadic principle, one should know that all moves in the moving world as enveloped by God and enjoy by what one renounces. So nature is thus not just something observed by a sensitive poet. It is something that the poet feels in his veins. It is like the most intimately tangible warmth of a living skin, and the most palpable vibration of the heart. It is inside as well as outside, and the human blood and the rasa of nature as perpetually mingled with the flow of universal life. Because in the short story, Bolai actually presents the boy's deep attachment with trees to such an extent that he's figured forth by the short story and by the story's rhetoric of a tree-like being. And Tagore introduces this trope in such a way that Bolai's identity is cast in powerfully non-anthropocentric terms. The conversation, which we will refer to immediately, is an example of Bolai's intense logical and spiritual crisis he undergoes every time a tree is harmed, or its branches are broken, or the flowers are plucked or torn. And here we have Bolai and his uncle and Bolai's aunt. And Bolai's aunt actually says, "Leave his tree alone, please," appreciating his pristine joyfulness as he watches the growth of the plants and the blooming flowers, which enables him to defy his isolated life and rejuvenate himself while interacting with nature. So in this short story, we observe Bolai's filial love towards the silk cotton tree, which for him was his life's friend. And he's concerned about his growth, and towards the end of the story, he requests his aunt to send him a photograph of the tree, which he's unable to do, as the tree was cut down by his uncle after Bolai's departure from the house. So Bolai's aunt is angry and sad on her husband's insensible and insensitive action. To her, the tree was the image of Bolai, his life's friend. So the narrative establishes the difference between men and women in terms of their attitudes towards nature, while the main subject projects a point of view that justifies an anthropocentric, androcentric behavior that values the utility and the monetary worth of the objects of nature. The female subject has a different approach involving the love of a nurturer, where the materialistic considerations of nature as resource cease to exist. Interestingly, through Bolai, though Bolai is a male child, this approach of nature is closer to the female perspective represented by his aunt. Consequently, the eco-philosophy, which he does not merely articulate, but rather embodies and performs, emerges akin to the eco-feminine, if not eco-feminist approach foregrounded by Tagore's narrative. It may be argued that Bolai's nurturing orientation to nature is a part of the circle. Nature as nurturer, inviting humans to nurture natural objects and beings. The gesture of paying respect to nature through poetry or through prayers may be seen as metonymically connected to Bolai's affective bond with nature. The secular nature poet, the nature worshipping sage, and Tagore's child philosopher, presenting, although through performing, a philosophy of with being nature are thus interwoven in the creative universe, and that sees and performs creativity through a non-anthropocentric lens. Through Bolai, the philosophy of Tagore, or Rabindranath, the poet, is advocated, and through Bolai's unique eco-philosophical orientation and gestures. However, Bolai is not just the metaphor of or a mouthpiece of Tagore's own eco-philosophy. As a fictional character, he emerges as a child philosopher whose actions and words justify the need to see nature in non-utilitarian terms, in terms of the integral ontological bond between human and the non-human. One may say that being like trees and capable of relating to them in a way that makes him natural relative of trees and plants, Bola is the philosopher of nature by virtue of his gestures towards non-anthropocentric forms of eco-conscious vita activa, rather than by virtue of any philosophical speech or theoretical formulation. Eco-activism and eco-philosophy, as we know, go hand in hand. Doing, being, thinking are brought close to each other within the effective framework of eco-consciousness. Bolai's apparently simple affective approach to nature lends validity to the form of non-anthropocentrically oriented philosophy, which might exist independently of discourses. Rabindranath was probably the first person to intuitively grasp the eco-philosophical potential involved in understanding and appreciating the sensuousness of the association between nature and human beings. This is evident in his writing from Shajatpur in June 1891. Much later, Ananas would point out how nature, like a rhizome, nourishes the diversity of local, regional, and national manifestations, and the transnational and transdisciplinary connectiveness of ecological thought. So humankind needs to understand this rhizome and contribute to it as a member of the planetary community, like every other, embracing its sympathy and empathy, which will enable human beings to discover nature within their beings. The tactile aspects of nature, the warmth of the sunshine, the vibrations of the living entities in nature, the caress of the breeze are no less important in philosophically understanding the creatively nourishing function of nature than the rational discourses on nature and its utility. Bolai, even Bolai's aunt and Shubhoshini, they all embody the spirit of vitality and joy, and that Rabindranath was able to discover in nature, which is the source of the worldly as well as the aesthetic enhancement of humankind. Their sincere love for nature, with which they are organically linked, is best described by Tagore in the concluding lines of the poem Homage to the Tree. O friend of man, I am a poet charmed by your music, and I bring to you with humble greetings this verse offering. This, and I quote from Rabindranath, obviously, and this signals a unique Tagorean sensibility that celebrates humankind's intense relationship with nature as a movement from the unreal to the real. For Satyam is Anandam, the real is joy. Throughout his life, Rabindranath adhered to such ethico-spiritual ideals inspired by the Upanishads and Buddhism, and in contrast to greed and self-aggrandizement vices which have engulfed human life and endeavors in the modern age. In his introduction to Leonard Elmer's address, The Robbery of the Soil, Rabindranath deftly analyzes human greed as he observes the rise of social standards in India, which has increased greed in human beings, and it has broken social bonds and drained the life sap of the community. Rapid urbanization is a danger looming large upon the natural space of the villages. This anxiety is again evident in three of Rabindranath's letters in Aptaporichoy, where he underlines the impoverishment of humankind caused by an arrogant devaluation of nature. So while his child philosophers present, perform, and gesture towards an effectively powerful eco-philosophical idea, Rabindranath took up the responsibility to translate such eco-philosophy through eco-activism, not through political slogans, but through an espousal of poetic living in the villages around Shantiniketan, which is now the UNESCO World Heritage. Moreover, he strongly believed that universities should respond to the call of such poetic eco-activism, a principle which is manifested in the university set up by him, that is Vishwabharati. So in 1923, when he founded the Institute for Rural Reconstruction, Sriniketan, with several other people, definitely Leonard Elmhurst, to address such issues related to environment, human life, we had the active participation with him of several others. Leonard Elmhurst, Patrick Geddes, Arthur Geddes, Gretchen Green, Harry Timbers, Rebecca Chetimbers, and several others who joined hands to preserve and restore the community enterprises in many villages. So, celebrating the purity and profundity of life force of the forest, Rabindranath wanted to establish an ideal school model on the Tapovan of ancient times, the forest hermitage, where children would grow up nurtured by nature beyond the restriction of urban living. For Rabindranath, the object of education is to enable human beings to realize the unity of truth, which develops from a creative spirit and not from a custom-made religion. With the passage of time, the school founded by Rabindranath in his father's ashram in Shantiniketan in 1901 developed into Vishwabharati in 1980, an expression of India's altruistic soul where the world makes its home in a single nest. Even today, Tagore's ideas on natural environment and its close association with humankind remains an inspiring message from a sensitive soul. In today's world, where the Anthropocene has become the buzzword, Tagore's eco-philosophy continues to manifest its relevance. Rather than grounding the principle of human freedom in the Cartesian split or in an anthropocentric idea of human dignity, Rabindranath advocated that nature had the enchanting power in her forms and beauty and colors and fragrances to lead every human heart towards a larger search for liberation. And during his times, the Shantiniketan Sriniketan model was the physical and cultural laboratory where an experiment with human freedom and human flourishing in the midst of nature involved effective observations, acute inferences, and committed action. Rabindranath's ideas on ecological interrelatedness accommodate the diversity of the local, regional, national, and transnational concerns within the framework of his eco-philosophy, a philosophy which gets manifested through child philosophers like Bolai, Amol, or Shubho in his fiction, who performatively de-anthropocize the domain of philosophy. One may perceive in Rabindranath's fiction, as well as in philosophy, an attempt to renegotiate all facets of human experiences from an environmental point of view, contributing towards the understanding of the human relationship to the planet. It is our responsibility to understand that every organism's unique way of being, if we ignore it, we exclude it from the ecological conversation, and thereby render our worldview impoverished. In a world divided by corrosive, divisive forces, Rabindranath's ecological ideas, embodied through his Shantiniketan and Sriniketan, inspire all of us to embrace an all-pervasive love for the integrally interrelated and harmonious coexistence of all life forms through an ecocritical cosmopolitan perspective towards life. As nature remains the life force for human sustenance, a constructive association with nature enables humanity to enjoy the elixir of life within the philosophical illumination, which lights up the inner recesses of humanity, facilitating the discovery of the unity of kinship, which is needed for true understanding of one another. Tagore's child philosophers are not just figures through whom ecological kinship of humans and all other beings and things in the world is metamorphized. They rather emerged as the unique philosophers of such kinship, not by observing it from a distance, but by being involved in it. Within Tagore's fictional world, performing this kinship with nature fuses seeing and being in a lucidity and luminosity, which makes us understand that the Tagorean child philosopher does not merely enact and live a philosophy. Rather, it is their luminous enactment of a profound living with nature, which anticipates our understanding and appreciation of the philosophical alterity represented by their wisdom. The light of this other wisdom which cannot be figured or defined anthropocentrically, offers us an alternative enlightenment that might be perfectly compatible with our eco-conscious age. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mollik, for such a thought-provoking presentation. Your talk has certainly deepened our understanding of Rabindranath Tagore's literary and philosophical engagement with nature, and how it challenges modern anthropocentric narratives, and also how it offers an early model of ecological consciousness relevant to the contemporary environmental thought. So really, we are enlightened with your presentation. So now we open the floor for questions. Already we have a question, and if anyone wants to ask any question, please feel free to type it in the chat box. So here is a question by one of our students, Momita from semester 6. She has the question. She has told that thank you for that insightful lecture. Do you think deaf, mute, orphaned, or otherwise compromised challenge characters have a greater sensory awareness or more attuned to the rhythms of nature? If so, why and how does such awareness shape their philosophy? So, Dr. Mollik, please, it's up to you.
Thank you, Momita, and thank you, Dr. Sinha, for posting it, and thank you, Dr. Shahu, for your kind words. So it's like, as I've kind of mentioned in my presentation, that they don't, the people who are deaf, mute, or orphan, they don't have that conscious utilitarian perspective always. Generally, they don't have, and so they are more sensitive towards understanding this philosophy and or understanding the rhythms of nature through touch or through their other senses. And I personally feel that really gives them to be at one with nature, which, because we don't see it like people who are not deaf or the people who are not mute or not often, they don't have that understanding always. But people who are deaf, mute, often, they have that understanding of nature, the philosophy of nature, or the touch of nature, because they're beyond the utilitarian perspective, and that makes them. And besides, the other senses are very strong and attuned to that understanding of the compassion and comfort which nature provides to them, and that makes them to be aware and also have an understanding that even if there are certain limitations in themselves because of upon which they are no control, but nature is there to as a compassionate healer. Nature is there as their mother, or nature is there as their friend or as their partner, who can heal them and make them view or see the world in a more different perspective, which is more philosophical, which people who are not like normal, like people like us, or who are not deaf or mute or not orphaned, who have not undergone through these trials of life, are often not able to understand. And in this context, I'm I can't deny that I'm bound to share this with you. I'm taking the liberty to take some more time. Is that I had a very close interaction with someone very dear to me who is no more there. And well, both of them are no more there, but they always remain in my lives. I think most of you know, those who are here, that is Professor Tapati Gupta and Mr. Shapon Gupta. So why I bring this reference is that because Shapon Gupta was blind, and the famous exponent of Rabindra Sangeet from Narendrapur Ramakrishna Mission Blind Boys Academy. So in their residence, I had long discussions because Shapon Kaku used to sing some songs whenever I am visiting their home after my National Library hours, and used to kind of make me realize how much he has perceived nature, and obviously that would also bring in the inputs of her wife, Professor Tapati Gupta, my very, very dear professor, who has played a very important role in my life. So I'm immediately reminded of my interactions with Shopon Gupta, who was perceiving Tagore's songs in the context of nature, and for whom how a simple rainfall could be a philosophical dimension of various atrocities around the world. And he used to interpret it in his own philosophical perspective, and he used to, it was not just some blatant philosophical establishment, but it was like establishing it in the context of his own personal argument, which was convincing. Yes. Okay. How do eco-critical approaches intersect with other critical theories such as feminism or post-colonialism? This is a very specific question which goes into literary theory, not into the presentation which I made just now. But anyway, I think you have eco-critical feminist perspectives, and you have eco-critical post-colonialism, post-colonial eco-critical perspectives. So that I think requires a different dimension or different discussion.
Thank you so much. Any other question?
I will just tell you that, because Rajashree's this particular question is really very good, because the Orient Black Swan series, or the recent series on eco-critical criticism, in that particular book you have eco-critical approaches being intertwined with feminism and post-colonialism. Like how post-colonial eco-criticism or post-colonial feminism or feminist eco-critical studies, I mean, that particular book has a lot of discussion. In fact, if it's not a very thick book, it's a slim volume, but it's very up to date. Mark, I will just give you some time. I will just share something with you. This particular book, you can, by Swarnalatha Rangarajan, you can actually refer to this particular edition and get your complete understanding of how eco-critical approaches intersect with feminism or post-colonialism. And in fact, this is there because it's very well analyzed in this particular recent edition.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Mollik. Thank you for such an engaging discussion, and also thanks to the students who have posted their questions. So now we move on to our next speaker, Dr. Debarati Dotto, who will be speaking on From Sacred Landscapes to Vanishing Forests, Eco-Critical Sensibilities in Indian Literatures. And now it's my pleasure to introduce hello, Dr. Mollik.
Yes, thank you for, yes, I actually raised the hand. The thing is, like, you know, I have a class now, within a short time, so I will switch off my camera, but I will be there in the introduction of Dr. Dotto's lecture, but then I have to leave. I hope you can kindly excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Shen Gupta. And surely Dr. Sinha. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dotto. Dr. Devarati Dotto is assistant professor, and presently she is the head of the Department of English at Dhupguri Girls College, West Bengal, where she also serves as the IQAC coordinator. She holds an MA and MPhil degree in English literature and earned her PhD from IIT Kharagpur in 2019 for her work entitled The Fashioning of Democracy and the Project of Multitude, a post-colonial critique of resistance through Hard and Negri. Her research interests include post-colonial studies, trauma and resistance literature, detective fiction, translation studies, and partition narratives. She has also taught in several institutions, including Maharani Kesiswari College, Khidirpur Degree College, and in IIT Kharagpur as a teaching assistant. Dr. Dotto has contributed to several edited volumes, academic journals, and has translated literary works. She has presented her research in national and international seminars and is currently engaged in a project on the recognition of Bangla as a classical language under the Department of Higher Education. Now I would request Dr. Dotto to deliver her talk.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. And again, a very earnest thank you for inviting me to speak on this webinar, international webinar, to Dr. Kakuli Ghosh Sengupta Madam, the principal of Swami Dhananjay Das Kathia Baba Mahavidyalaya, as well as to my friend and also kind of a colleague for a long time when we were in our initial days of doing research and teaching initially in the college, Dr. Swati Sinha from Swami Dhananjay Das Kathia Baba Mahavidyalaya. Thank you for your kind invitation. I am a little worried about the fact that my camera is probably giving some disturbance regarding the laptop area setting, but I guess I can share the screen. I will have a short PowerPoint presentation. So will I be able to, can you kindly check if it is okay or to share my screen?
Yes, you can share, then we'll confirm, ma'am. It's okay, ma'am. All okay.
All okay, right? Okay. So after this it's good afternoon to everyone and good morning to Shoptoshi, I guess, because he's there in a different time zone than us. But after this really very interesting and deeply philosophical kind of understanding of Tagore's take on how eco-criticism has a long history in our understanding of human values, living, as well as literature. I'm coming to a very like short kind of arc that I wish to present before you, primarily meant for the undergraduate students of our colleges, because nowadays we have in our present syllabi module that we mostly follow in our university undergraduate colleges. We have had introduction to various theoretical aspects as well as to texts which are also relevant in our times. So taking that perspective in mind, I thought of structuring today's presentation on that particular note. So my presentation is titled From Sacred Landscapes to Vanishing Forests, Tracing a Journey of Classical Reverence to Contemporary Resistance. And here I would try to study the ecocritical sensibilities that are very much evident in our Indian literatures uh, since the time of Kalidas. But for the paucity of time, I would not be able to like touch every other war, but I have tried to take a few select pieces which are probably relevant to our student syllabi in mind, keeping that perspective in mind. So, well, first of all, what is eco-criticism? Now, today, as Shoptoshi was saying a while ago, that Anthropocene and is a buzzword now, and planetary crisis. We are living every day amidst news of planetary crisis, ecological devastation, depredation, and how people are coping with it. That has now become a kind of a urgent, also kind of a urgent human problem, a kind of a human precarity through which we are living our everyday, which are like constantly also, we are ghosted by the war of various kinds being there. So, lot of kind of waste materials are also generated, biodegradable, non-biodegradable, which has impact on the environment as a whole. We all know that. But coming back to our topic today, how this has been taken up by literature, because we all understand that literature is something which grows out of the lives that we live around, the lives of people that we meet around every day. So, eco-criticism has been a very organic field of study, which has gained popularity. The coinage, I would say, has gained popularity since 1990s. It is an interdisciplinary field of in literary and cultural study and inquiry, which engages with the relationship between literature, culture, and the environment as a whole. And probably when we are talking about eco-criticism in literature, we are trying to look around the how this textual representations of nature has come into our everyday, as well as how cultural narratives of different communities through a long period of time shaped the ecological attitudes of people in different countries, in different civilizations, and how storytelling of, when we are talking about cultural narratives, definitely we are talking in terms of different oral traditions, storytelling. They have come up from a long time through various communities, and how they have given shape to ecological sensibilities, attitudes, and reflect the environmental consciousness of the human lot as a whole. So sometimes we are reflecting on that, and sometimes literatures are written as if like in contemporary times, when the climacteric and the planetary crisis are so imminent and are as our everyday reality, we're often trying to resist the kind of environmental degradation, and which is the root cause of all of that has been linked to the developmental discourse of modernity and globalization, which has brought home to every other parts of the globe, especially in the global south, and the stories of various kinds of environmental conflict, of environmental devastation, degradation. These developmental discourses are being resisted every day in our contemporary literatures in many ways, and we try to look into that also when we are studying eco-critical works or eco-criticism. Now, emerging in the 1990s, as you can understand, in the West, eco-criticism has since then evolved to include various kinds of perspectives. The post-colonial being one of the prominent. The just the last in the last question that somebody posted for Shoptoshi, someone was asking about post-colonial and post-feminism. So probably I'm not going into detail over that, but probably we can understand, that since the post-colonial nations today are facing most of the burden of environmental degradation, depredation, so the post-colonial perspective becomes very important, tackling the entire discourse of environmental and planetary crisis, and thereby starting from the new social movements that we had in India in 1990s with the Chipko movement. I'm sure many of you, I'm talking especially to the students if they are somewhere listening to our discussion today, if they have heard about the, I'm sure heard about the Chipko movement, which was predominantly again a woman movement. So the feminist perspective is very much linked to the environmental consciousness as a whole when it comes to India. Uh, they are not just addressing, or romanticizing the wilderness or nature writing, which has gone on in the West when you're talking about romantic literature, uh, or of Wordsworth, Shelley, and Keats, or even Whitman. But we are talking in terms of the urban ecologies today, the issues of wetland management, the climate changes, which has disrupted the mode of living and survival of people in various parts of the global south, especially in the Indian subcontinent. And I'm sure this is where literature comes in. So much of that is being written about every day, not only through opinion spaces, but also like writers like, I'll come to them, writers like Amitav Ghosh, and also various journalists are writing about it. So eco-criticism therefore it can be seen as a methodological lens which seeks to question the anthropocentric paradigms of modernity, which had focused so much on development, on creating pathways of erecting a global world built on communication and network. But in the bid of developing and modernizing the third world, or especially the global south, what has often come under scrutiny or what has often been overlooked or sidelined is how the ecology, how the environment has been the main victim in all of it. And eco-criticism as a methodological lens is a critique of that developmental question and tries to rather reclaim a sense of nature living not only nature living in a very humanistic sense, but also nature as a part of multi-species being today. So that is where eco-criticism actually is not only a methodological lens of literature, but also of humanities and social science as a whole. Because now the question is not only how that has been represented in text, the literatures that we read, but how culturally we tackle the issue. So it becomes a very ethico-political question also at large. So this brings to my next part of focus, is that what kind of eco-critical sensibilities are present in Indian literatures. In Indian literatures, okay, I hope my slides are visible.
Yes, yes, it is visible.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So, in this slide, I would try to focus on how the eco-critical sensibilities, through a large span of time, has come to be very evident in the Indian literatures. In Indian literatures, we have this ecological consciousness, not merely as reactive to of today's climate crisis, which I am talking about just now, but it is a kind of a poet. It had been a kind of poetic, cultural, and ethical tradition, and never a mere kind of a backdrop, but a kind of a philosophical access point, the way Shaptoshi was talking about Rabindranath and his engagement with the question of nature. So therefore it's a kind of a living presence. And before this coinage of eco-criticism got very popular, we can see that in India, the Indian poets, be it the poets or the philosophers, they were constantly giving force to what we today understand as ecological sensibilities, which are rooted in our everyday, which was rooted rather very much as a mode of practice in their everyday life, as a part of their lived cosmology. And we are in this literatures, we would try to read that how is the natural world depicted, what kind of ethical responsibilities do the artists try to portray or reclaim or show how humans have towards the non-human being, and how colonization or modernity, and especially the global capitalism, have impacted that ecological relation. So this is something which will be of very contemporary modern relevance today in the literatures that we read now. So coming back to the cultural practices and philosophical thoughts of Indian subcontinent, we find that in Indian subcontinent had a long this history of a deep ecological consciousness, which is a mode of our cultural living for a long time. In India, you can very well understand, in not only for a long time, but even today, starting from our river Ganga, to the mountain Kailash, Himalaya, and even the kind of like everyday practices of worshipping trees, like not only the banyan or the peepal tree, but our everyday tulsi gach. We are not only worshipping them, or but it also reflects, and that through that it reflects a kind of a worldview where nature is very much not only sacred but also an animate being. So something which we hold very organic to our life and living, and therefore very when communities who had keeping or who are keeping this tradition alive even today, when they find that their own land, which they have worshipped for generations, their mother nature, which they have worshipped for generations, they find it exploited, dams constructed, or and how the fury of nature is revisiting them now. So they find that this is where civilization or the development question has gone all wrong. And to even today, like the place from where I'm sitting, very near to my place is this great mountainous river, Tista. Every year now, for the past few years, we often hear media reports of how not only the glacial glow or the glacial outburst has impacted the course of Tista. Every now and then there are reports of floods and landslides. So, like people who are closely associated with the river and communities who live in close proximity to that, they say that like this river is our god. Our god is infuriated by all the kind of like developmental dams and big projects and the tunnels and the railway projects coming to Sikkim and destroying our ecology. This is the way where gods are taking revenge. So, my point of bringing this story here is this, that even today, communities who have uh, grown their life and living in close proximity to nature hold nature as their supreme god. So just not something which is a mere pictorial background or a romantic refuge or a romantic fantasy, but a part of their organic living. And when that a part of their rhizomatic connection to the world, when that is exploited, when that is taken away, so as if one part of their living is cut off. So this kind of philosophical tradition was all very evident in our Indian system as well, as one could have seen in Rabindranath, well, which Shakushi was also mentioning, of concepts of Advaita Veda and also Buddhism and every other practices of our philosophical tradition, which have continued to stress on the ethical living with nature. And definitely the folk and the oral cultures maintain that these cosmologies are a part of our relational world. So, and the practices and the rituals, they are not only full of stories but also practices of sustainability of nature. And how the Indian post-colonial world has written through these written, resisted whenever ecology, whenever environment has come under attack, starting, as I was referring, starting from the new social movement of the 1990s. And their critique often questions the kind of the exploitative practices which obviously the Britishers brought through when they first started with the forest policies and clearing the forest for their own kind of avenues of generating generating resources. So when they started exploiting the forest and brought so much of forest acts into practice, that was the beginning of the extractive form of and the exploitative forms of British methods of colonization. So Indian cultural theorists and practitioners, journalists, and people who have lived in close proximity with nature have written since then about all of it. And definitely, I would bring in the discussion to our contemporary field with writers again from Northeast primarily, situated very close to the Northeast right now. I'm speaking from Jalpaiguri, which is again a place which has so many indigenous communities, endangered animal species, and constant erosion of habitats due to ecological degradation and environmental depredation. So I'm constantly knowing that how people from this region, writers from this region, contemporary writers, I'm sure several of them are also in the textual syllabus of our students in many universities, including Bakura, probably. Writers like Mamang De and a very prominent writer from Nagaland, Esterine Kairi, who recently got the 2024 Sahitya Academy Award, among others, writers who are responding to the constant deforestation and the hydroelectric projects and climate degradation of the Northeast through their storytelling, and how their storytelling brings a very prominent place-based knowledge which challenge the developmental narratives of development. So these will be the way through which one understands how the contemporary literature and how the eco-critical tendencies have come up very conveniently and very urgently, and also they problematize the entire developmental discourse which is happening today in many parts of the Indian subcontinent, especially in the Northeast. So while doing this literary arc, some of the sketches I have kept in mind are while speaking about this long-standing ecological awareness in Indian literature, I'll try to bring in contemporary sacred understanding of nature through Kalidas, go into Tagore and his understanding of nature through Jibanananda Das, another prominent 20th century Bengali writer and poet, to our contemporary Northeastern writers or writers writing in English from the Northeast, Mamande and Esterine Kairi. So most of the themes that would be covered will be how, first of all, bringing the trajectory from sacredness uh, to memory and resistance of the indigenous cosmology. So when I speak of Kalidas, again, some of the not only Kalidas is somebody whom we see as a revered figure of the classical Sanskrit world, but also today I understand that we have several works of Kalidas being studied by undergraduate students in their syllabi. So, because I probably wanted to keep this discussion of today for the undergraduate students, I was trying to look into a few texts which might be helpful for them to understand. So, Kalidas, as you all know, that the great revered Sanskrit like poet, scholar, and dramatist. So his work, including Meghdut, Abhigyanam Shakuntalam, they embody this early Indian eco-poetics, if I have to mention, where a cloud becomes an emissary of love, uh, traveling across the lush, uh, detailed, very detailed and evocative portrayal of the subcontinent through the understanding of the topography of the cloud. Trees, rivers are therefore not inert objects to Kalidas, but vital actors in the emotional and the spiritual journey of the cloud. And where the hermitage, the Tapovan, where Sakuntala grows up, therefore, is not a wild entity to be tamed, but something which is cultivated through aesthetic and ascetic care and ethical kind of responsibility. She is interconnected with these rhythms of nature. As you read through the text, there are plenty of references where we find that she's just not a symbol of purity or emotional purity or emotional sensitivity or harmony, but her bonds with the natural world, they reflect this ethics of care, which is very distinct from the political machinations of the court, from where Dushyanta, the king, comes. So, in contrast to all of that, her world, the ecological harmony of Shakuntala growing up in the Tapovan, is can be read, as a kind of a foil, uh, a kind of a foil to the symbolic world of hierarchy, detachment, and very like the patriarchy of Dushanta's world. And gradually we find that when Dushwanta severes the bond with Shakuntala, what he's doing is probably he is forgetting all that bond with nature with which a human being grows up. So that is how the relational dynamics or organicity of human life and the ethical living has been portrayed by Kalidas. So it is just not, as I was saying, just not a human emotion, just not a soul, just not a mere pictorial background or romantic imagination, but is associated with the cosmic rhythm of living, a relational dynamics. They're refuge and teachers which teach you about the principles of life and living. This worldview, which is presented in Kalidas, was also something which was very prevalent in the philosophical traditions of our land. There has been no strict division between the human and the non-human. So this pre-modern ecological imagination of the natural world as sentient and a morally significant part of our being, which is very deeply intertwined with a human beings growing up, was something which we find uh, uh, being so well presented by Kalidas, and through which the journey of our understanding of how eco-critical sensibilities has been there in Indian literature right from the onset. So next I would, so since it's a kind of a overview I'm trying to give, I'm going not in detail to every text, but trying to give you a bird's eye view through which one can probably delve into the text. Rabindranath Tagore the ethico-aesthetic ecology again of belonging. And here, why what Shoptoshi was very well saying that Tagore's vision, how it was influenced by Upanishads, and it this was contrary to the kind of a colonial practice of extracting and exploiting resource. His poetic vision was not only steeped in Upanishad sensibilities, but nature was where nature becomes an expression of divine rhythm. But it is not simply like pastoral, it is also deeply pedagogical and practice orient when we come to his conception of Vishwabharati and the foundation of Shantiniketan, because this aspect of the nature was seen by Tagore as a profoundly ethical understanding of our growing up. In his poem Prakriti, Tagore writes, the same stream, and these are very, very commonly quoted lines from the poem. The same stream of life that runs through my veins, night and day, runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures. So the way Tagore envisages our growing up understanding of being always as a relation to the cosmic dynamics of the natural world. The self is not a separate Cartesian subject, not separate from the environment, but a deeply immersed being, a deeply immersed sensibility, and which is like growing up in the vitality with nature. And this conception I was saying was very deeply, so much profound in him that later uh, his own conception of Vishwabharati, his foundation of Shantiniketan were principles based on this learning from nature rather than from what colonial industrial education of modernity, exploitation, extraction tried to teach. Even in the poems of Bir Purush and Shishu, this natural world is seen through the eyes of the narrator as a site of curiosity, wonder, and ethical encounters. In his essays, his novels. So Tagore is such a wide, open vista of sensibility that it would be grave injustice for me to speak uh, anything on the Tagorean aspect of the aesthetic possibility of belonging to nature in the in the framework of this presentation, but just for the sake of giving uh, a kind of a bird's eye view, as I was saying, to how Tagore's entire oeuvre was associated with it. I'm trying to give some examples through his poems, uh, even his novel, which is often read with such nationalistic zeal, and but also one can find in the poem, in the novel, a deeper yearning for rootedness and belonging to the soil, a soil consciousness, so vital in the understanding of this novel, which brings us again into the fold of the organic living with nature. His essays, like Topobon, he contrasts this Indian idea of forest as a spiritual retreat with this colonial imperial vision of nature as a resource. Today we are more convenient with the kind of a language that the global West has given us, the paradigm of understanding environment through resource management, through development through sustainable practice. But Tagore had shown us long before what that sustainable practice of living is, not with the understanding of the colonial modernity of resource management, but as a living aesthetic and ethical practice of belonging to nature. And that was uh, so well practiced in Vishwabharati, in Shantiniketan, and his conception of Sriniketan. Now, coming to another poet who is again so well read in this part of Bengal, Jibanananda Das. And Jibanananda Das, again, we know he's a poet of the rural Bengal countryside. But his, as I understand, that in his portrayal of the world of nature, there we find a more modern ecological vision. The landscapes, rivers, ponds, fields are marked or imbued with a sense of mourning and loss. In the poem, which is like very well known to everyone, probably some of you have read, I'm talking to the students definitely, Bonolata Sen and Ruposhi Bangla, this natural world is seen as constantly getting alienated, fragile, moving away, which is intimately again connected to his understanding of a nostalgia, a memory which is slowly losing its ground. Writing in the midnight 20th century, Jibananando captures the alienation of the urbanized world and the vanishing rural landscape. There is a kind of, one can understand, eco anxiety, a post colonial eco anxiety, and he demonstrates that not through overtly protesting about it, but through his poems, through the lyrical intensity of his poems, which is tinged with the layers of mourning. His forests are no longer mystical sanctuaries or refuge. They are caught between life and oblivion. So one finds a shift here from the sacred ecological harmony that we found in the world of Kalidas to the slowly modern kind of an estrangement happening with the lost rivers and the flickering fireflies and the rural world which is constantly getting erased. His in Bonolata Sen, for example, he mourns this loss of rootedness. For thousands of years, I roamed the paths of this earth, from the waters of Ceylon to the Malayalan darkness of night. And this wandering narrator is both the time traveler and an ecological witness, where nature is not just a kind of rooted organic life world, but now only a repository of memory, of history, a pristine space which is constantly getting eroded. In Ruposhi Bangla, another very famous poem of Jivanananda Das, the landscape, which is lush and green and luminous, is again shown as vanishing, on the brink of vanishing, the shallow ponds, the silent villages. So, ecological identity, I would say, in the case of Jivanando's poem, with the trees, grass, insects, and stars. There is a sense of kind of a sense of not only loss but also a sense of vulnerability about something slowly dawning in about the what awaits the post-human world. The landscape is constantly endangered. as if felt at a very personal and a poetic level. So, jumping from Jivanananda Das, uh, two very contemporary poets. For this presentation, I'm restricting myself to, as I said, few select textual or few select writers and poets. Jumping now to a very contemporary poet of today and a place where I'm very closely associated also with. So from Arunachal Pradesh, Mamang Dai, and again the texts which are probably going to be there in most of your syllabus to the students. So Mamang Dai's two poems that we have, the of small towns and rivers and voices of the mountain. I'll come to them. So Mamang Dai is from Arunachal Pradesh. She writes from Arunachal Pradesh, and here we have, and again another important shift in the kind of ecological sensibility in when it comes to the literary discourse. From the literary nature and the symbolic value of nature, we are coming to the natural world as a cultural mix now. So in her poems, the landscape is not just a metaphor, but also a repository of myths, memory, and the indigenous knowledges which are constantly under attack due to the rapid urbanization and the developmental discourses and the projects which are making inroads thanks to globality and thanks to the discourses of globalization. So her writing is about the shared memory of this indigenous cosmology, which is also a repository she shows of the environmental knowledge system, and how that repository, how literature to her, and how these natural world provides a kind of a resistance to that modern discourse of globalization, which has hounded environment in these parts of the world. Her writing emphasizes that forests as an ancestral terrain interwoven with spirits, oral traditions, and cosmologies which defy the uh, any kind of binary thinking between human and non-human, but rather brings a distinctively multi-species kind of a ecological vision to Indian literature. So on that note, I would try to probably draw in a few lines from the poem of Rivers and Small Town. She writes, "We live in a land where myths grow like forests at the edge of a dream." So myth and ecology are here intertwined. Rivers and lands are not just water bodies, they're timekeepers, historical agents. This forest at the edge of the dream, it suggests a kind of a fluidity, a rhythmic connection with life, with the nature as a part of life, the human as a part of that natural, an extension that challenges any kind of, as I was saying, the binary between myth, nature, culture, and all that. Uh, the West has bought. Now, in that other poem that again probably the students might have in their syllabi, in The Voice of the Mountains, she personifies, for example, the mountain as a witness to human change. I'm the voice of the mountain, a traveler between the worlds. I pass judgment on the world. I have no tears. I've seen it all. So you see, this narrative is decentering the human subjectivity. It is I here is no longer the anthropocentric human I, the Cartesian I. It amplifies rather the non-human agency, which is very vital when it comes to today, uh, today's intervention of eco-criticism or eco-criticism in the global south as a decolonial strategy of reading. Her writing emphasizes this forest as an ancestral terrain, which is interwoven with traditions and oral myths and cosmologies. So this is how I understand that the very non-anthropocentric vision of the world is posited by Mamang Dey, which is ontologically inseparable from the human existence. Continuing this legacy and the lineage, which is a part of probably the writings from the northeast of India, when it comes to this eco-critical writings or eco-critically sensitive writings, we have Estherine Kyrie now, who is, as I was mentioning, the 2024 Shahitya Academy winner, and where she is continuing this tradition of storytelling as an ecological resistance of a tradition of indigenous place-based like eco-criticism. Uh, Kyrie's novel, especially this one, When the River Sleeps, talks about the protagonist's journey into the forest, which becomes a kind of a spiritual quest and also a confrontation with the violence of modernity. The protagonist journeys into the forest and finds a sleeping river, which is itself a spiritual and ecological and political act. Most of like other many other contemporary writers from the Northeast, um, like I'm reminded of other apart from Mamang Dey and Aster and Kyrie, about writers from Meghalaya as well. So she critiques the land grabs, the erasures of indigenous knowledge, uh, which happens due to the developmental discourse. And she writes in a very deceptively simple narrative voice. Her narrative writing or her writing insisting on dreams and myths as valid epistemologies. They are just, in the tradition, much in the tradition of magic realism. She crafts her dreams and sensibilities, and her forest becomes spaces of both a kind of a resistance and also as an enchantment. So, this kind of belief system or this vision is something which is unique to the writings from the Northeast, which challenge the kind of West centric discourse of environmentalism, but which talks about sustainable practices. Rather, they are kind of resurrecting what sustainability means when it comes through indigenous knowledge system, which is itself therefore a decolonial strategy. So it's a kind of, she presents how the slow violence, the gradual invisible harm, which is every day done by the state, the corporate actors, through sand mining, through deforestation, making the ecology vulnerable and the community is vulnerable. So her writing is constantly resisting these kinds of statist incursions, and speaks about rather kind of a language of resistance, where resistance is a part of living every day in close proximity with that mythical natural world, which is a part of the Northeast. So, and finally, I would like to therefore end this presentation uh, to through this kind of a reflection that, as we just saw from Kalidas to Kaire's Enchanted Forest, Indian literatures have engaged with ecological imagination through different registers. And unlike the Euro American eco-criticism that privileged pristine nature, Indian eco-critical sensibilities are more about plural relational worlds through which we live in, and these refuses the nature culture divide, rather offers us various kinds of indigenous decolonial epistemologies, which invite us to read not only differently but also live differently, to see the world not as a resource but as a teacher, as a relative, as a home. In the works of all the writers I have just mentioned, we find this kind of rootedness in the regional life worlds, and they were all writing in different historical political context, but the overall, if I have to give an overall nutshell of all that, it is not only about the mourning of what has gone past, but it also reimagines how we live with the multi-species in today's world. So if I have to look into environmental humanities by engaging with this lens of reading literature, we demand that this kind of reading of literature gives us a framework where we understand nature, literature, and justice in a world which is constantly being uh, pushed through the developmental axis. But our resistance, our reading through literature can perhaps resurrect that when we keep in mind these kinds of uh, discourses, reading discourses that have been so germinal in the sensibility of Indian literature, or so germinal through which Indian literatures have grown this long. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dotto, for such an enlightening presentation. And it was really thought provoking. And I guess our students they can, of course, connect to the detailed discussion, detailed presentation that you have delivered, because most of the takes they are very much familiar with. So, thank you so much. So we have a question from one of our students from semester 2, Suraj Chakraborty. He said that, ma'am, you have very beautifully illustrated the matter in detail. I have a question. What kind of impact of Topobon can be found in the ethical values of Shokuntala? So, Dr. Dotto, if you kindly elaborate on this.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shahu. And thank you, Shuraj Chakraborty, for posting this as well. So, as I was trying to mention that Kalidas had been very interestingly positing the idea of relational living in the world of Shakuntala. Shakuntala grows up in Topobon, and this kind of Topobon is, as we find, a very sacred, not only a sacred world, but also a world which is very different from the forgetful, hierarchical, and political world of Dushantu. Topobon is a rhythmic connection with nature. So Shakuntala's growing up with the deers and the plants and the birds, they are they have given her a unique sense of understanding not only nature, and given her also the or nurtured in her the ascetic sensibilities, the ethical understanding of life, Kalidas shows that how that is something which we understand as Shakuntala, and all of it is an ecological harmony of growing in Topobon, which is very different from what Dushanto's world represents. So Dushanto's world can be symbolically seen, therefore, as something which is a world of amnesia, a world of forgetting those ties with the environment. Whereas, in contrast, Shakuntala's world is a world of growing up in the Topobon, in the forest, as a part of a soul, growing up in the world of nature, of natural purity and harmony, and relational organic living. So that is how it has shaped Shakuntala's ethical life, as well as her ascetic life of care and of emotional vitality, in contrast to Dushanto's world of amnesia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Datta. Now, our principal madam has posted a message. Very lively discussion and presentation you have put forward, where you have nicely pointed out the identity crises of different natural species as depicted in the writings of Kalidas, Jibanananda Das, and many more contemporary poets. Thank you very much, Devarati madam. This is a message from our principal, Dr. Kakuli Ghosh. So I
Thank you,
think
thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Otoshi, if I might take the liberty of calling you by the first name. So thank you for, and probably I have taken much of the time. I'm very sorry for that, maybe. I couldn't really register how much of time I have taken. So I'm very sorry to Mrinalini as well as to the organizers. So thank you, ma'am, for your kind words. I try to probably engage with the students and other talks later on. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Now we will move on to our next speaker, Dr. Mrinalini Ghosh. She will be speaking on how colonization has shaped our current attitude towards environment, critical literary perspectives. So now will be introducing Dr. Ghosh. Dr. Mrinalini Ghosh is employed as an assistant professor in English at Hoksaranga Virendra Mahavidyalaya, Kuch Bihar. She completed her doctoral degree at the Department of Film Studies, Jadavpur University, with the research area being contemporary Latin American film, literature, and popular culture. Her research interests include culture, modernity, and urban studies. She is currently a collaborator in a project on syncretic possibilities and fairground experience in Kuch Bihar, funded by the India Foundation for the Arts. So now I would request Dr. Ghosh to deliver your presentation.
Thank you very much for this opportunity given to me. Thank you, Dr. Shengupto, Principal Madam, as well as Dr. Sinha. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, in the sense that eco-criticism is not really an area that I personally have worked with in my scholarly activities. However, I have taken this as a kind of a workshop like scenario, and I have my paper is basically kind of deliberations on the kind of on post-colonial critique of colonization, but through the framework of eco-criticism, and I really look forward to the feedback that hopefully this will provoke. And another thing, I am really delighted to say that I felt that my paper in many ways speak to what Professor Mollik has presented, as well as what Dr. Datta had presented. So I think this might be in many ways engaging in that sense as well. So without further ado, I begin my paper. I do not have a PowerPoint, so I apologize for that. I will be reading, but I also have an image which I will just present while I talk about it in the course of my lecture. Anyway, when we look at the concerns that plague the planet today, climate change is most definitely ones. The pursuit of a homogeneous idea of development that seeks the reckless exploitation of the natural resources the planet has to offer, combined with the promotion of an aspirational culture of consumerist utopia, is pushing us closer to the point where catastrophic changes in the environment will make our existence here on Earth, if not untenable, difficult indeed. While billionaires fed on a healthy dose of science fiction fantasize about colonizing Mars and other planets when life on Earth becomes impossible, literature offers us insight into how our current attitude towards the planet became the dominant one. In 1719, Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe was published in England, a work that became extremely popular, prompting not only the author to write sequels, but to spawn similar works which came to be referred to as Robinsonade. In the book, we have the eponymous hero, Robinson Crusoe, who accidentally is shipwrecked and finds himself washed onto an island devoid of any inhabitants, but ripe with natural resources that he can then exploit and turn into material wealth for himself. This book and its hero have become cultural icons in England, and I here will just present you the picture of a um, just a minute, sorry. I just wanted to show this picture. Right, it's here. Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes,
So this,
visible.
right. So this is an image of a commemorative plaque which was put up in 1973 in Queen's Garden, Hull, in England. Hull is actually the dock from where Robinson Crusoe is supposedly to have sailed in his ship. And in this image, we see him, very interestingly, we see him with his gun in one hand, with his axe that is stuck in his waistband, the axe to cut down the trees, and the gun to eradicate or make do away with whatever threat that the island poses before him. So here itself, in this image itself, captures the kind of violence that is necessary for the colonial exploitation that Robinson Crusoe, in many ways, poses to the land that he arrives at. Um, sorry. So this they became cultural icons in England, and more relevantly, he has become a site of much post-colonial critique that sees in him the spirit that drove British and indeed European colonization of the planet, seeing in it endless natural resources that can be exploited for the profit of the empire. Nearly 100 years before the publication of Defoe's bestseller, another Englishman by the name of William Shakespeare wrote a play called The Tempest, presumed to have been written around 1610-11, where he also writes about a man on an island. Prospero, the magician protagonist of the play, is exiled and makes his home on this island, whose control he gains by overthrowing its previous sorcerous ruler, Sycorax. His daughter Miranda is characterized by a blessed state of ignorant innocence, while his two slaves, Caliban and Ariel, represent two faces of the colonized. Ariel is a spirit of the air and serves as Prospero's eyes and ears on the island, pleasing Prospero with his actions that draw benefit to his master and is ultimately rewarded. Caliban, the son of Sycorax, a savage monster, is kept in chains, shows open hatred for Prospero, lusts after Miranda, curses his master in what I would say is one of the most famous curses from Shakespeare, and is punished. Post-colonial critique has seen in Ariel the collaborator, while Caliban is the resistance to colonization. Rabindranath Tagore, in his essay, in his 1902 essay Shakuntala, very interestingly draws a comparative analysis of Kalidas's eponymous heroine Shakuntala with Shakespeare's Miranda. One of the assertions that the essay makes is to bring out a prime distinction between two alternate perspectives on nature, as demonstrated through Shakespeare's text and the character of Miranda, and Kalidas's play, Abhigyan Shakuntalam, and the character of Shakuntala. In the first, nature appears to be something external to civilization, to the self, and proscribed by what might be called a state of innocence that is premised on ignorance. In the latter, nature is present, diffused within the self, and an extension of it. Konnorushi's forest retreat is not outside the realms of civilization, but rather is one where the human mind is shaped by the natural world it finds itself in, and where the relationships that bind Shakuntala to her friends is extended to the natural world of the ashram as well. While Miranda's progress as an individual, her movement from innocence to experience, require her to leave her island haven of a home, Shakuntala, says Tagore, is incomplete without the natural world she is part of. And here I quote, "She is one with the forest retreat. As when she waters the plants around her home, she anoints them also with sibling love. She takes the youthful, newly blossomed Nobomalika flower into her tender heart through her soft gaze. When she leaves the forest retreat for her husband's home, every step is fraught with ties and pangs of parting. This sense of unity is extended to the hunt that King Dushyanta embarks on, which evokes at the very beginning of the play the cry, "Do not shoot at the deer, O king," a hunt that as its object encompasses both the figure of Shakuntala as well as animals. The deer and the Shakuntala, dwellers of the forest retreat, are here seen together. Tagore writes, "In the Tempest, man has not enlarged his being by extending himself into the universe beneficently in a tie of love. He has tried to dominate the universe by curtailing and tyrannizing the latter." The play Tempest, as Tagore reads it, is locked in a conflict between nature and man, where the savage demonic nature might have been tamed, silenced into subjugation, as in the figure of Caliban, but yet bears venom and hatred towards the man who seeks to control it for his own gain. It is not this very spirit to dominate and control that prompts the European colonizer to look at the colonized man as a savage who can either be tamed and, failing to do so, can be killed, since in his essence, the savage represents a threat to the civilizing mission of the colonizer. The Cuban scholar Roberto Fernandez Retamar, in his very seminal essay titled Caliban, published in 1971, speaks of the Tainos and the Caribes. The Tainos were a native population who were inhabitants of the Caribbean island Christopher Columbus arrived at in 1492, and he was received by these very friendly island dwellers. They were a non-violent community who were periodically attacked by their more violent neighbors, the Caribs, who lent their name to the Caribbean, who reportedly practiced anthropophagy or cannibalism. However, within the next 50 years, following the arrival of the Europeans, both the Tainos, who were the so-called noble savages, and the Caribes, the very violent ones, had become extinct as both as a community and as civilization. To the European, the people of these lands they sought to exploit were a part of its natural resources. I mean, Australia, for instance, the Aborigines were not counted as part of the nation's population until a referendum in 1967 changed this. It is not only that European colonization repressed and exploited a land, robbing its material and natural wealth from its inhabitants, it also by force established an idea and system of development that replaced other alternatives that may have prevailed in other cultures. Now, Bibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay's novel, Aronyak, published in 1976, very poignantly portrays this very process of the erasure of one form of existence that is entwined very holistically and sustainably with the natural world, and being replaced with another that eradicates the forest and entire ways of life to make way for this imposed developmental project carried out in the name of the nation.
In Mexico, a spokesperson for the indigenous activism and resistance movement, the Zapatistas, which was a movement that came to prominence in the 1990s. The spokesperson is identified as Subcomandante Marcos. He had a very interesting perspective to offer. Now, Marcos himself was a leftist activist who grew up in Mexico City, and he went to the Chiapas, to a region where the Mayan population of Mexico live largely, and he went there to work in that community to help them resist the land grabbing that was being carried out at the time by the rancheros, the rich landowning class of Mexico. He says, as he sat with the indigenous community to speak to them of their right of ownership of the land, he was met with the response that one cannot own land. This land is an entity in itself and cannot be owned by anyone. So these are very interesting kind of alternative perspectives that are completely erased when we talk about these very basic kind of attitudes towards rights and so on. The use of force and therefore violence is thus necessary to establish the kind of control and domination of natural resources, that is nature, in the developmental project that colonialism exported to all corners of the world. Be it the violence of the Belgian colonial presence to the rubber boom in Congo that Joseph Conrad explores in his much analyzed and critiqued novella Heart of Darkness, or the massacres carried out by the United Fruit Company in Colombia in order to sell packaged bananas, which is later given mythic dimension in Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. So here, in all these cases, we see that a culture of terror is deemed necessary in order to ensure development. Michael Taussig, the Australian anthropologist, in his assessment of Robert Casement's report on the Putumayo rubber industry in Colombia, this is part of his book on shamanism in Latin America, in Colombia. So he analyzes how this culture of terror was, what the function of the culture of terror in this region. So Robert Casement, to briefly introduce him, was an Irishman. He served as a British consul, diplomat. He had been sent to the state of to investigate the state of the rubber industry in Colombia following a report by an American named Walter Hardeberg. Now, Hardeberg was actually an engineer by profession, and he had observed things that were happening in the forests of Putumayo during his time working there, and he had witnessed the hellish torture and killings of the indigenous populations of the region by the rubber company operators, and had then returned to write about it in newspapers in London at the time. So the government, the British government, was then forced to launch an investigation into this, and Casement, interestingly, who would in 1916, following the Easter Rising, he would be executed because of his role in that. He was sent to Colombia to investigate on behalf of the British Crown. And in 1913, he produces a report on the Putumayo terror. One of his chief analyses was that the terror was used because of the shortage of labor, or to quote Taussig, the culture of terror was functional to the needs of the labor system. However, Taussig points out that the indiscriminate killing of the indigenous people, as was practiced by the rubber company managers, would not be a rational response if the shortage of labor itself had been the issue. Instead, what Taussig points out is that the culture of terror was necessary to establish a form of labor exchange that the indigenous community had no interest in. Quoting from another anecdotal documentation of the rubber plantation life in Putumayo by a priest, Father Alberto Gridilla, who writes that the Indians were not interested in the money that was being offered to them in exchange of the rubber they brought, and had to be flogged into submission so that they would receive it. To actually give them money, they had to be flogged. Father Gridilla writes, and here I'm quoting, "The savages don't know money. Their needs are very limited, and they ask only for shotguns, ammunition, axes, machetes, mirrors, and occasionally hammocks. An Indian he describes as a corpulent and ugly savage declined to accept anything. And on being pressed, this Indian replies, "I don't want anything. I've got everything." So the whites insist again and again that he must ask for something. And finally, this fellow retorts, "I want a black dog." Now, the person who dealing out the wages, he says, "And where am I going to find a black dog or even a white one if there aren't any in all of Putumayo?" "You ask me for rubber," replied the savage, "and I bring rubber. If I ask for a black dog, you have to give me one." Thus, we see that European colonization attempts to establish their control over the natural resources of the region through violence that is practiced on the people as well as the land. This is manifest in our country as the indigenous communities call for their rights to water, forest, land is met time and again with state violence because one attitude towards nature over another is deemed profitable and preferable. As protectors of their Jol Jongol Jomi, the indigenous can be rendered into legitimate targets of violence through this framework of economic and social development. It is this same framework that legitimizes Israeli violence against the Palestinians when Israeli officials refer to the people of Gaza as human animals. The underlying sentiment is that as animals and therefore part of the natural world, they can be killed with impunity to make way for the developmental projects that Israel has planned for that land. Thank you. I end my presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. We're extremely delighted and obviously enlightened. I hope everyone present here enjoyed your stimulating presentation. We have a question from one of our students, Borshita Mondol, semester 4. She says, "Thank you, ma'am, for such an engaging presentation. My question is, how does Caliban's relationship with the natural environment in The Tempest challenge colonial narratives of wilderness?"
Absolutely. Actually, this particular question that you raised is a very pertinent one, or it's treated as a very pertinent one in Latin American philosophical discussion. In fact, a Latin American writer before Retamar, there was another. I can't remember his name right now. He wrote an essay on Ariel, actually. And he sees Ariel as the spirit of the island, and who is this who is philosophical and who is not utilitarian in the sense of both Prospero and Caliban. Much later, this was back in 1890s when this particular essay came out. Then in 1970s, Retamar writes his article on Caliban, and where he sees Caliban as that natural world which can be suppressed through dominance for the time being, but that venom that it carries cannot be obliterated for eternity. It will return. And just looking back at your question, if I've answered it. I hope I've answered your question. I think I have.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I don't think we have any other question. So with that, we come to the end of our formal sessions. As we come to the close of today's webinar on Ecocritical Perspectives on Literature and Culture, it is my honor to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of English, Swami Dhananjay Das Kathia Baba Mahavidyalaya. First and foremost, I express our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speakers, Dr. Saptarshi Mollik, Dr. Devarati Dotto, and Dr. Milanili Ghosh for taking time from their demanding schedules and enriching us with your insights. Your talks were intellectually stimulating and opened up many new perspectives. And now we are deeply thankful to Sri Gorapada De, Governing Body President, for his patronage, and to our Principal, Dr. Kakuli Ghosh Sengupta, for her constant encouragement and guidance, and of course for graciously inaugurating today's event. A special thanks to all the faculty members, colleagues, and students, both from our institution and beyond, for your active presence and engagement. Your participation has truly made this webinar meaningful. I also acknowledge the contribution of the internal quality assurance cell, IQAC, for their collaboration and support in organizing this program. Lastly, to the organizing team, the technical support group, your behind the scenes work ensured everything ran smoothly. Thank you. A special thanks to Mr. Lama Sherpa, Dr. Rofia Molla Suldana, Mr. Satyajit Roy, Mr. Tufan Sarkar. And let this be the beginning of more such critical and creative dialogues. Once again, thank you all and have a pleasant evening ahead. Thank you.
লাইভ স্ট্রিমিংটা তাহলে বন্ধ করছি।
Leaving now. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Meet you very shortly. I am telling Shati to make arrangement for an offline seminar.